openers.
Andrea asks, what do you think about Vivek being the governor of Ohio, Atlas? I'm not completely sold on him. I worry he's a rhino.
I'm out on Vivek. Not to say like I couldn't get back in on Vivek. I mean, probably not. I'm completely out on Vivek. I don't want him to be governor of Ohio. I don't worry that he's a rhino as much as I worry that he is like just a simple snake oil salesman. I worry that he is someone who is entirely in for these things for himself. I do worry about his background as well. I worry about, what led to his, obviously the scam artistry of what he did with his product, with the pharmaceuticals, trying to sell a product that he knew was busted. And I think was taking money away from his mother, even to like make it work in the first place. But ultimately, Ohio specifically, when you look at it pragmatically, Ohio is a very purple state and it's gotten more purple over time. And I fear that Ohio can kind of fall like Wisconsin, where Ohio may ultimately become like a blue state. And I think for the future of politics, when it comes to like the electorate, right? I think that's a net negative for like how elections could go. And so I think when I think about it pragmatically, it's like if I have my choice between like Vivek or some kind of, cut of the cloth regular Democrat, it's like I kind of just fall back to the incrementalism argument where it's like, I guess like he's not perfect and I don't even think he's a good candidate, but if I'm looking at the lesser of two evils, that's kind of the route that I would go at. But I think that's ultimately the path we're on anyways. And I don't really see any kind of challenger coming at Vivek that would even be on his level for Ohio. I mean, it's really going to come down to like DeWine versus Ohio, I think. Ultimately, it'll be like the namesake, the household name versus Vivek. We'll see how that plays out. But no, I'm not sold on him on any regard. And I think he's basically been doing a lot of PR since those comments on Christmas.
Right.
We've been trying to get his image back to where he had it previously.
It damaged him for sure. Andrew followed up and said, I don't trust him either. Jay, there is something about him I don't like. I can't put my finger on it. Well, I can tell you what you probably don't like is that he speaks, his cadence is exactly like Barack Obama. And that is a turnoff for me. The other thing is that he's not a Christian. He says he stands with Christians. But those are the two, things. The second one, not being a Christian, is more important to me than the fact that he talks with the same cadence that Obama does. But the fact remains, that's who he reminds me of. And he's even been quoted, just like repeating an Obama quote, which it worked for Obama. So I think that was maybe Vivek growing up with Obama being president, saying this is presidential. I'll model myself after this person, potentially.
Yeah.
And even use effective quotes that Obama used. But, it's one of those things where Just Me mentions, and I think this was actually a good point. She says, I'd like to see Vivek as governor of Ohio 100%. Then we can really gauge where he's at as far as moving forward for him being a presidential candidate. And that would actually be a good, scale, I guess. But at the same time, I've said multiple times that Vivek needs to maintain his consistency that he had, the status quo that he established during Trump's campaign and Vivek's own campaign in his America First type principles and policies, and his disconnect from Americans, which TNT brought up that he wasn't really that wrong. I mean, we do have huge issues with young men and women in our country right now. His way of going about it and saying it was, I think, one of the reasons why people responded so harshly, or the fact that he said it in the first place. But my main thing is, like I said, he just doesn't come from that Christian perspective. And so
it would be like Cash Patel, right? He gets sworn in after he wins the governorship from Ohio, and he's like, "Do you have a copy of the Bhagavad Gita so I can swear on that?" And he does the same thing too, right? When he puts out like the 10 things America needs to hear, right? And he always does those appeals to God, but he always tries to hide the fact, or at least like be avoidant of the fact that like, yeah, he's not Christian by any regards. And so it's like it goes back to this again, like the overall kind of subversion of like the Christianity, right? It's like, yeah, we kind of worship the same God, right, guys? And he's like looking nervously around, like, no, we don't, like we don't at all, like in any sense of the word. And again, it goes back to the same thing, which is like, I don't even have an expectation that Vivek would uphold Christian values. He is somebody who would take the looser definitions of things like religious freedoms and such, which I reject outright. And someone who I also don't agree with much, but I think I would prefer to Vivek with someone like Charlie Kirk, who would also heavily disagree with what Vivek's interpretations are of religious freedoms. And so on those, on those 100%. But Ohio is very far away from being like in Oklahoma. You know, there's very, very, very little, you know, Christian leadership inside of Ohio right now, at least in terms of like name, you know, household, you know, value that people can kind of recognize on a basis like that, just non-existent at all.
Andrea says, Atlas, run for governor of Ohio, please.
Yeah. I would get missing personed probably so fast if I tried to do anything political. But yeah, it's a good thought. I appreciate the sentiment. But yeah, I would. I have a daughter to take care of, unfortunately. Maybe she gets a little bit older, and my wife can handle it. If I get missing personed, then maybe I'll think about
it. That's funny. You guys, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. Share this with everybody that you know, of course. Let's see here. So we got
well, yeah, I wanted to, if you had that video, I wanted to, that Wade Stotts video while we're on the topic of Vivek.
Let's play it. You're gonna have to mute yourself, or not mute yourself, fine. But yeah, let me pull up the share screen. We'll put that on.
I'm ready.
Okay. There we go. And I'll just let her rip. This is 6 minutes long, but you know, if we need to pause it, just let me know or whatever.
Yeah.
Batman, Jason Bourne, me. What do we all have in common besides our capacity for violent heroism? That's right, we all have multi-layered identities. But today I want to talk about American identity. That's the topic of a recent debate between Fox News' Will Cain and candidate for Ohio Governor Vivek Ramaswamy. Seen here about to herd some sacred cattle. Vivek talks pretty fast and in a way that's built around applause lines. But I want to see if we can boil it down to the bare propositions. Wish me luck. We'll start it off by asking the key question.
What does it mean then to be an American?
Here's the first part of Vivek's answer.
I think it is an ethos, a creed, the basic idea that no matter who you are or where your parents came from or what your skin color is, that you get ahead in this country with your own hard work and commitment and dedication, and that you're free to speak your mind at every step of the way. We are the nation on God's green earth where you get to realize the maximum of those God-given gifts without anybody, not a government, not a bureaucracy standing in your way. That's the set of ideals that makes America itself.
It's a little hard to summarize, but here goes. An American is someone who believes that anyone who comes here and works hard enough can be successful. Okay? And here's part two.
The thing that's different about America versus other countries, you or I could go to France and live there. We would never be a Frenchman. We could go to Germany. We would never be a German. Italy, and we'd never be an Italian. Japan, and we'd never be Japanese. We could go to China or India, and we'd never be Chinese or Indian, actually. But we could both be here, or people from every one of those countries could come here and still be an American.
So the second thing that's unique about America is that people from any country can come here and become one of us. That's what
makes America itself.
So in short, though Vivek would never be so bald about it, America is what it is because it has so many great opportunities for foreigners. Again, I'm just trying to summarize. The problem is that by that definition, America wasn't itself until 1965, after the passage of the Hart-Celler Immigration Act and after we'd become the world's leading economic superpower. Big immigration and big opportunities. Sure, they settled Jamestown in 1607, but it really became America about the time my parents were born. And now that America is America, how does someone join? In other words,
how do you become American? I think that every high school senior who graduates from high school right here should have to pass as a condition for graduation from high school the same civics test required of every legal immigrant to this country. So should we require a foreigner who comes to this country to speak English, speak it fluently, know about the history of the country, know about our Constitution, know about our founding, know how many branches of government there are? You're darn right we should.
To be fair, at least the logic is consistent. If America is an idea, then becoming an American means learning all the ideas. The problem is that this turns assimilation into a sort of trivia contest, reducing American culture to being really good at school. And in case you think I'm overstating it,
we also have to retain and preserve a culture to assimilate into.
Yes.
And we're not heading the right direction, Will, if our own kids, 85% of kids who graduate from high school, can't answer those same questions. We've gone too much to a participation trophy culture rather than a championship trophy culture. I think that's the essence of America, is we're founded on exceptionalism.
For Vivek, the center of American culture is hard work, specifically academic work. But there's one problem.
A kid in China right now is 40 years ahead of a kid in the United States.
So by his definition of American culture, China is more American than America is. And a Chinese kid who can speak English and watches Schoolhouse Rock is practically George Washington. Will pushes back by saying that America is a people, and it's defined by its culture and history, not just ideas and hard work. Vivek's attitude is, yeah, it's a people, but what really separates it from the rest is we have the best ideas, the best opportunities, we're good at school, and we're open to immigrants. So that's his vision of American identity. But the most interesting aspect of his definition is what he leaves out of it. To define ourselves by our openness to outsiders is to define ourselves away, to define a house by describing the front door. 4 years ago, I moved to Moscow, Idaho. Imagine if I talked to someone who's been here for 50 years and said, you know, there are a lot of places out there, but what makes this town unique is that I can move here and get a good job. That may be the best part for me, but it's not what makes it what it is. Will's right that the question of American identity is the question of our time, and we're not the first people to ask it. Russell Kirk and Samuel Huntington have written whole books about it. But one key element is that America is distinctly Western. Specifically, it was created by a bunch of English Protestants. People who are not English Protestants came here, but they came into an English Protestant project. And even then, there are key differences between the kind of people who left England and the kind of people who stayed. The whole European mind meme is true. There are certain things unique to Americans. But the core goes back to England. The settlers defined and the immigrants joined. Anytime I talk about America's British culture, I always go back to the great clip of Justice Scalia, saying that as an American of Italian heritage, the first time he visited England,
I felt at home.
Now, there's no guarantee that Scalia would feel the same way about England today. But if an Italian Catholic can say this, as can Yoram Hazony, why can't Vivek? There's a lot to say here, but the bottom line for now is that we are not just an opportunity mill. We are more than our ideas and more than our economy. As I watched this clip from Vivek, I couldn't help but think of this David Mamet quote. People may or may not say what they mean, but they always say something designed to get what they want. I can't read Vivek's mind, but I can speculate as to why he wouldn't want to lean too heavy into history, heritage, and religion when talking about American identity on the campaign trail. Defining America is like trying to define your mom. You may not have a ready definition, but you know when someone's got it wrong, or if they've left out something important. The topic isn't going away, and Vivek is going to have to address it more and more in the race for governor. But if that doesn't work out, at least he can have his
participation trophy.
Here, let me take that down, and you should be good.
All right, I'm out of the timeout corner. I mean, Wade nails it, right? That was a very concise, just breakdown, just using, one of his recent appearances as Will Kane.
Very quick.
Talking about it, right? It's the American identity. Now, I think this, alongside the question of what is America, also in terms of that was kind of like what is America in its like domestic sense of identity. We also are going to have to answer the question of what is America on its external and international identity as well, which is kind of what Ivo Elmo had alluded to a couple episodes ago. Maybe it's the last one, I can't remember, about how we're going to have to answer that question of like, are we going to continue to be the American empire, the world police? What is going to be our identity? And especially when you look at, say we do use historical reference, right? We look at heritage as well as tradition, and you look at all of the warnings that we got from the ones who defined what America was, which were those English Protestants, which were people like George Washington's. They said very obviously and overtly, do not get involved in foreign entanglements. It was clear that by the defining of what they wanted for America, They wanted this country to be a very isolationist country. They wanted not to get involved with other countries' affairs. They wanted to be independent to its truest sense. And that means things like energy independence, manufacturing independence, being entirely able to be a country in and of itself without having to resort and rely on anyone else outside of the maybe minor kind of trade benefits you could get, and not whole on having to completely depend or rely on other countries to source very, very basic necessities that you would need, similar to how we got in our country now currently with like China and like with pharmaceuticals, right? I think Sean Ryan recently tweeted that America would last 2 weeks if, you know, trade broke down completely with China and we lost all this access to those pharmaceuticals, as well as the other smaller, the things that make up the pharmaceuticals, which have a specific name. They're like nicotoids or something like that. And yeah, it's spot on. And I think that will ultimately be what defines Vivek's campaign trail if he does choose to continue on that path, which is he's going to continually be asked, what is it to be an American? And I think the longer that he continues to resort to what he said to Will Cain, the more that he's not going to have the heart of the MAGA base with him. They're going to kind of walk away from it. They say, hey, no, like, I don't agree that we are defined with how Wade said. We're defined by what our front door can do. We're defined by the people who actually made the country and the people who were there, who lived it, bled for it, you know, died for it, versus, you know, who can come in the door, you know, and how our immigration policy is. Like, it's more about the guys who built it, pioneered it, and you know, and betrayed their own family members for it, than it is about, you know, what they said about who's allowed to join it now that we've kind of defined the rules. And you know, I think he's pretty spot on there. And I think ultimately, in the end, that's why Vivek probably will not be able to win a presidency under the Republican ticket unless he changes, you know, course on what defines an American to him.